Next month, James Gunn's Superman drops in theaters and kicks off a new DCU. With that in mind, I wanted to go way back and look at the original superhero blockbuster, Superman the movie from 1978. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Let me know what's your thoughts on Superman the movie, and give me that point of reference. Is this a movie that you grew up watching? Is it something you've watched for the first time recently? It's the kind of movie that, because it is the original superhero blockbuster, I mean, Batman, the movie, came out in the 1960s, but that was an adaptation of a TV show. It wasn't a blockbuster as we think of big blockbusters. It wasn't a huge budget movie. It was an adaptation of a TV show. And Superman the movie was the first time they went, let's throw an enormous amount of money and resources behind making a comic book movie. And because of that, it's the oldest, the most antiquated of a genre that now is and has been the biggest movie genre on the planet for a while now. And that means there's so much kind of tied to this film. Its influence, its importance, how much it's meant to so many different people, but also it's a movie that has many elements that can be considered dated, that are dated compared to modern day filmmaking. Modern day adaptations of Superman and even who the character is in the comics has changed quite a bit in the last 47 years. So it's a movie that people can have very different interpretations of it. In fact, my good friend Cody Leach has never seen it as of the point in time that I'm shooting this review, and he's planning on watching it for the very first time over the next few weeks, and I think he's going to post a review of it. I'm very curious what he's going to say about the movie as someone that is watching it for the first time 47 years after it originally came out without any of the childhood nostalgia or anything like that. How does it hold up for someone like him? I'm very curious. But this is also a movie with a fascinating backstory. The movie came about because a family called the Salkinds were becoming these big movie producers, and they were basically just looking to make money making films. They'd had success doing the Three Musketeers and shooting movies back to back in the early 70s, and thought, what can we do that would be even bigger? And we're thinking like entrepreneurs. What's the untapped market? What's the thing that people like and care about a lot that no one's tried yet?
To give the Salkinds credit, they saw, I guess, the future in making a film out of Superman, which nobody did. Warner's actually owned DC Comics. They could have made it anytime they wanted to.
And in their exploration, they decided to go with Superman and decided to go with kind of comic books. That they went, nobody's really tapped into that. What if we did that and like threw a bunch of resources behind it? Like, what do Americans absolutely love? What is their mythology? Superman. And therefore, they went, let's go all in on this and try and do it right. So you're thinking, when they started working on this in the mid-70s, they went, who's the biggest storyteller on the planet? The guy that wrote The Godfather, Mario Puzo. So they went to Mario Puzo just a couple years after The Godfather and Godfather 2 came out. And we want you to come up with a Superman movie. The creator of The Godfather creates this epic 2-part Superman tale. This is massive, huge, gigantic. And how much of the movie that we got, or movies that we got, are his version? How much were adapted by the later screenwriters? I don't think we know exactly. I haven't seen an in-depth analysis of Mario Puzo's draft or anything like that. But he's the one that came up with the original epic tale that turned into Superman the movie and Superman 2. Other writers came in and kind of made it more kind of mainstream and something you could actually film. But that's what they went with. And then when they were trying to make the film, there was a zillion actors that they wanted for, or they tried to get for Clark Kent, Superman, and there's all sorts of tales of Robert Redford, Clint Eastwood, Sylvester Stallone, like all the names that were huge in the 70s. They explored, but eventually they decided to go with an unknown, Christopher Reeve, someone that was a very trained actor. He went to Juilliard. He was like, had as good of training as you can get, but hadn't had his big breakout role yet. And they cast a no-name as Superman and then surrounded him with the biggest names on the planet, going back to the guy that wrote The Godfather, makes the script, and then they went, who are we going to get play Jor-El? They get Marlon Brando just a few years after The Godfather. Like, and stop and think. Nowadays, casting the biggest actors on the planet for a comic book movie, that's just what you do. This was the 1970s, and they'd never done this before. Like, people thought comic books, they thought Batman TV show, Biff Baff, campy, cartoonish. You don't think The Godfather. And so they get this very serious, dramatic actor to play Jor-El. And then for Lex Luthor, they cast Gene Hackman, who's one of the biggest actors on the planet, also for doing stuff like The French Connection, like the very serious, grown-up dramas, and they get him to play the villain. And so, no-name actor, they take a risk on our Superman and surround him by the biggest names on the planet and just spent enormous amounts of money on actors. Like, the amount that Marlon Brando was paid for a very small amount of screen time is crazy. And then throughout the making of the movie, because they were trying to make a man fly at a point in time when it was very difficult, the movie went way over budget. The plan was to shoot part 1 and 2 back to back, and they mostly did that. They shot like 80% of part 2 with Richard Donner, and then they're like, we're not running out of money, we're not finishing the movie, stop shooting part 2, just finish part 1. But there's a lot of tension between Richard Donner, and Richard Donner was hired because he'd done The Omen. So he does this very dark horror film that is like as bleak as horror films can get. And they cast him or hire him to make the most, hopeful of the superheroes. Talk about a director with range. Goes from The Omen to Superman and then becomes very famous for the Lethal Weapon movies and Goonies. I love Richard Donner. But Richard Donner, as someone that did, like the Salkinds, the producers didn't really understand Superman. They just understood popular and let's get big names. They understood that. They didn't understand Superman. Richard Donner grew up on Superman. He understood Superman and wanted to make Superman something special. And so he's treating it dead serious. He doesn't want to do 1960s Batman campy. He understands that this is American mythology.
So I felt that during the 70s and 80s, I was the temporary custodian of a part that is an essential piece of American mythology.
And therefore it needs to be treated that way with reverence, in scope, in size.
I have a sign to this day in my office of Superman flying through the air, dragging a sign by him that says verisimilitude, because the story had to have its own honesty. Everybody had to believe it was real.
And that's what he brought to it. And the Salkinds were like, you're going over budget. Make it faster. Get it done quicker. And they brought in this producer, Spengler, to try and like bully him into getting stuff done. So eventually when they finished part 1, they fired Richard Donner and brought a different guy in to direct the second one, finish directing the second one, because the tensions got so high with Richard Donner, which is crazy. Like, he directs a movie that made them $1 zillion and was beloved. He pulled it off, but because of his like dedication to making it good, they fired him. It's the stuff that drives you crazy in these things. But so it's a film that when you get into part 2, we'll talk even more about all of that stuff and how crazy the backstory is of the 2 different cuts. Actually, there's a lot of cuts of Superman 2 for a variety of reasons. There's actually a lot of cuts of this movie too, that they shot a ton of extra stuff that they put into the TV broadcasts in the 1980s. And that's what I watched growing up, was the TV broadcasts. They're like 30 minutes longer. And later on with DVDs, you could actually start to get that stuff. But I was confused whenever I first watched the movie on a proper VHS. I was like, it's missing scenes. Where's this? Where's this? Same with Superman 2. I was like confused. And it's because the television broadcast, they threw stuff in to pad out the runtime so it could cover like a 4-hour block of time with ads. So, fascinating stuff of how movies worked way back in the day. Today's video is brought to you by Factor. Summer is here. We've got more sun. The pool is open, and I want to spend my summers with my kids at the pool, not in the kitchen cooking and cleaning. That's where Factor comes in. Factor's chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals are ready in just 2 minutes, taking the hassle out of eating well. Factor meals arrive fresh and ready to eat. With over 45 weekly menu options, you can pick gourmet meals meals. Choose from options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and more. I go with either Keto or Protein Plus because I'm a high protein, low carb kind of guy. Just got back from the gym. We've got queso fundido and ground beef and cauliflower rice, all with over 40 grams of protein. Factor powers your day sun up to sundown with nutritious breakfasts, on-the-go lunches, premium dinners, and guilt-free snacks and desserts. Factor has your whole day covered. I use Factor to hit my dietary goals with delicious and convenient meals, and you can too. Get started at factormeals.com/Sean Chandler 50 off and use code Sean Chandler 50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code Sean Chandler 50 off at factormeals.com/Sean Chandler 50 off for 50% off plus free shipping. We're not here just to talk about the backstory and all the little factoids that I find interesting about the movie. We're here to talk about the movie. Let's get started with the good. And simply put, when it comes to Superman the movie, I am of the opinion that this is one of, if not the greatest, superhero movies of all time. And when you say that, it's a little bit tricky because it is the most antiquated of the superhero movie blockbusters for the reasons we previously discussed, which is to say that when it's the original of something, it's the oldest of something, it is also the most ancient and antiquated for all of those reasons. But I think it's a movie that, if I'm not watching it in a modern day vacuum, I'm not watching it for the first time now. This, when I was growing up, until I was 7 years old, the only superhero movies that I had were the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. That, like, it was the whole genre was this. In particular, the first two movies. That was the superhero movie genre until I was 8 years old. And then all you added was Batman, Michael Keaton's Batman. And that was, the two of them were the genre up until, like 10 years later when finally Marvel joined the game. And the reason this was able to be the full genre is because they did something that absolutely captured the magic and took it seriously. That comics were for a long time viewed as something for children. It didn't have this broad, grander appeal for all ages as of yet. It hadn't been taken seriously as mainstream storytelling like it was in comics and some TV shows. And when they did the Batman TV show, it was campy, it was goofy, it was silly, inherently so, like leaning into the campiness. And so for the first time ever, with comic book source material, they went, we're not going to just adapt this. We're going to adapt it as if this is premium source material. Or to use the language of today, this is premium IP. This is worthy of the largest budget of budget of all time. This is worthy of Mario Puzo and Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman. And they brought this reverence to the material that had never really been brought to comic books before.
They had a different approach to Superman than I did. Their approach was kind of a parody on a parody.
There had to be a radical change in tone to do it the way Dick wanted to do it.
And you feel that watching the movie. It's the sort of film that if you remember him in the suit, you remember him saving the helicopter and stuff and turning back time, the things that people kind of maybe pick on a little bit, which a lot of times you forget is that he doesn't appear in the movie for 50 minutes. And he doesn't appear in the suit for about an hour into the film. Well, I guess when he first appears, he is in a suit. He doesn't do his first rescue until about an hour and 5 minutes into the movie, where it spends 50 minutes telling this epic tale of the last son of Krypton, of a society collapsing, of a child by luck landing with a family with good old-fashioned values that found the most powerful being on the planet, quite literally found him in a field, and raised him to be a good man. He had all the power to be a Zod, to be evil, to conquer the planet, but he was raised to be a good man. And it's shot and scored, and the production design are just impeccable. like rewatching it a week or two back with my kids, and it kicks off, and it just starts off with the credits. Even the credits have this sense of importance. Some of that is the simple fact that it is this incredible John Williams score that set the foundation for all superhero themes moving forward. Combined with, we're doing the credits and they're having like the text fly at the screen, and like the credits themselves feel epic. And we come out of the credits and we fly into Krypton. And you can look at it now, and does it hold up? And is it maybe a little bit the way would we do this? Sure, of course, obviously, it's 47 years old. But we're flying in, and just the music that John Williams is using, and you can look up the influences, and it's pretty overt where he's drawing inspiration from with some of the music in here. But it picks just the absolute perfect piece of music to just capture this sense of grandeur for Krypton, that you're flying into it, and you feel this world that has done incredible things, and maybe this sense of arrogance to all of it at the exact same time.
On Krypton, I was intending it to be almost semi-biblical, and people spoke in very stilted, elegant English.
There's this, in just the music playing, I can't think of any modern day comic book movie in any time recently that simply by having us fly into a setting captures the scope, just the size. A whole society is captured in this one slow moving shot into the planet with the music playing. We just don't do that anymore. They don't make movies like this anymore. And at the time they made this movie, they'd never done it before. That's when we talk about this movie being special and doing something different. There's just something about it, what they were trying to accomplish, that just feels so bigger than what any comic book movie is trying to do now. And we go from like the destruction of Krypton, where you have Marlon Brando playing Jor-El, giving these epic speeches about the power of his son and what he'll be able to do on Earth. We go from that to just classic, Americana.
I guess it did have a feeling of Norman Rockwell.
That was written that was a very bucolic style, very Andrew Wyeth.
It was really small town USA, as all the artists had done in the 30s and the WPA art.
These shots are like cornfields. And the simplicity of, we're showing just these little episodes of Clark growing up. And each of them is like such an important lesson of, he's kind of this bullied outsider because he's not allowed to be himself. So he has to perpetually be a little awkward and hold back. He's not able to be himself. He's not able to let people know what he can do. And he wants to play football. He wants to do all this stuff, and he's not able to. So as soon as people aren't looking, he's kicking a football into space because he wants to. Like, he's got the same desires as everyone else, but he's being raised by good parents that is like, there's something more important than kicking a football. And just like us, like we just get like one father-son moment between him and Pa Kent. And it means so much. It's so powerful. It's so moving. I didn't say this earlier, but again, will be a spoiler review, so we're going to be spoiling all the way in here. And this leads into Pa Kent heart attack, and followed up with Clark Kent. There's such a simple statement with all these powers, and I couldn't save him. Just everything that he like means, like, such a simple line. And it means so much in this context of a person desperate to save his loved ones, desperate because he values life, can do so much, can save so many people, but he can't do everything and he can't save everyone. It's just like a really profound little line. It's so simple, yet so profound. And there's like a shot of him just standing in a field as he realizes that he needs to leave, and his mother walks out to meet him. And it's just this absolutely gorgeous shot. It doesn't need to be, but that's the movie that you're watching. from Richard Donner that feel like this is important. What I'm doing matters. Generations have now grown up on Superman, and I'm going to take that seriously. I'm going to respect that. These kids have grown up, and I'm going to make a movie worthy of Superman. So even a simple scene, this is this crane shot of them in a field, and it pulls back, capturing the idea of the world is getting bigger, and he's no longer in Smallville. He's going to go and become something bigger and more, and has to leave to do that. And it's just this absolutely gorgeous shot. Once again, they do not make comic book movies like this anymore, and they'd never done it before either. It really is kind of this anomaly of a film that was allowed, because it's kind of I guess in many regards, it was this independently made and then distributed by Warner Brothers, but by these crazy Salkinds that even though they didn't get it, they happened to trust the right people that did get it. At least they trusted them on the first movie. To tell Superman with the grandeur and epicness that he deserved. And they allowed an hour of the movie before we get to this. An hour of the movie of Krypton, cornfields, football, wandering in the ice, learning about the cosmos, all of it to make it so clear how important all of this is. And I prefer the first hour of the film before Superman shows up because it is just such a beautiful film. That's just it's weird to say because I'm about to tell you how much I love him in this role, but the movie was better before he was in the movie. That's crazy. But that also, that's why I love the film. That it just treated it with so much reverence. But then we get to Metropolis. This guy shows up, and there's ways in which kind of people, can act as if, it's a dated version of Superman. Oh, shucks, take the glasses off. And it's in many ways from a bygone era. And therefore you can watch it and interpret it through that. Also, if you watch this movie on its own terms, in the context under which it came out, the performance of what Christopher Reeve is able to do in this film in transforming. This is like a 6'4" athletic guy, and he puts on the suit, the glasses, and he becomes the biggest doofus in the room. The way his face moves, his body his mannerisms, his posture, it goes into awkward Clark Kent mode. I'm not comfortable in my own skin, and I'm a good old fashioned guy that doesn't really know what to do in this strange big city. He transforms into a different person, and in an instant. Sometimes in certain scenes, like when he's in, Lois's apartment, or he's in Lois's apartment, and he's debating whether he should tell her. He just sits there and he's goofy, awkward, takes the glasses off, transforms into Superman, and has this moment where wouldn't it be so freeing if I could just tell her the truth? And then he puts the glasses on, and it's all in one shot, and he's playing two different characters in so many regards, because Kal-El, the real Clark Kent, has to play fake Clark Kent. And you see the transition in the shot, and he's so good at it. You buy into the fact that that the glasses would be a disguise, because the glasses aren't the disguise. The performance is the disguise. The glasses are the superficial thing you see, and the change of the hair is what you see. But you see a person become someone different. And you start to buy into the fact that maybe this could work. And that's, I always go back to with these casting of these, where the character is the star. You don't need to cast a star. You cast, because the Superman's always going to be the star. Batman's going to be the star. Spider-Man's the star. So you find an unknown that disappears into the role. And all of that goes back to, that's what they did here. And it was perfect. It was amazing. This was incredible what they did here. And that's always why I go back to it. Superman will sell tickets. You don't need an actor to sell tickets to a Superman movie if you make a good Superman movie. And to me, this is the standard right here. And some of it's simply because he was the one that was given the most opportunity to be a very goofy Clark Kent that likes Lois Lane, as well as be this very strong Superman. from there, you get into the movie, and it's the classic origin tale for Superman. Of course, we had all the Smallville and everything like that. But then we get to Metropolis, and it tells the classic story of the introduction of Superman to the world. It does it in such a great way. Like, it feels quaint today to do a helicopter rescue, but it's also just classic superhero stuff. That Clark Kent moves to the big city. He's waiting for his time to finally be himself. He couldn't do it on the football field. He couldn't do it in high school. He couldn't do it in Smallville. And now is the time and the place to allow what he's doing to shine. And it's not to score touchdowns. It's to save lives and to make the world a better place. And so this helicopter starts to collapse. And it's just like such a great sequence because it's tension of a person is in danger. The aw shucks Clark Kent walking around like realizing something's happening with the fantastic John Williams score that built into the theme is the buildup. That's one of the things that's so good about the Superman theme that it crescendos, it builds up itself. It has the moment of the Clark Kent going, this looks like a job for Superman. Like it's in his head going on, and the music is building up, leading up to, let's rip the actually, I can do that. Rip the shirt open, and we got the Superman underneath it. Or in the case of, this particular scene, he's running towards the rotating doors and has to rip the shirt open to make it happen. But even in it, there's a little bit of a joke. There's a couple little jokes in there that don't break the tension. They're appropriate jokes where he's like going to do the telephone booth, but it's not a closing telephone booth. And he puts the suit on and someone's like, hey man, that's a nice suit. Like it has the humor in there, but not something that breaks the momentum. And it's not something that undercuts the tension. He's still moving fast, trying to figure out what he needs to do to keep the disguise, keep the identity, goes in there, takes off, and then it pauses just enough to have the reactions to everyone there. A man is flying, and she's like, you've got me, who's got you? Like the wonder of it, that people are amazed that this would be happening. And it captures all of that, followed by a montage of Superman stopping crime and saving cats from trees. Stuff that's missing from most comic book movies these days. That they're so locked in on the big supervillain stuff. MCU in particular, I think, is bad at this. That it's all about the big supervillain threats, and it forgets about day-to-day stuff. And this movie, it has the most powerful of the superheroes, the original one. And he gets a cat out of a tree because he's a nice guy. That there's a little girl and her cat's up on a tree and he wants to help her. And all kind of with this little playing around with the idea of people's reactions to the appearance of Superman. Like the first time you'd see him, it would be amazing. And so it's like people in a plane, police officers, parents hearing from her. Like everyone's like, what? What are you talking about? Because it would be incredible. It would change the world. So, and from there, we'll talk about something like, we'll talk about Lex Luthor in the more the negative side to this one, but or how it could be perceived as negative. But it builds from there of kind of the size of things, of the Superman saving the planet from itself, Superman choosing to interact to save a world, Superman falling in love. It goes in all these different directions and touches on such big things. There's a reason that this became the template for superhero movies moving forward. It's the reason that this was the one that they threw all the resources into it, and it stuck. That here we are, James Gunn's movies using the music from this film. That 25 years later, when they did Superman Returns, almost 30 years later, they made it a unofficial sequel to Superman 1 and 2 because it did so much right and it captured the hope, the spirit. You believed a man could fly. It like made you excited for superhero movies. Like it captured all of that stuff. That's why to me that this is one of, if not the greatest superhero movies of all time. That there's just something magical about seeing Superman come alive on the big screen, and they got it right. And with anything, the first time you do it and the first time you do it right, there's magic there. And ever since then, they've been trying to redo it. But they already did it with such reverence. They already did it with such a spark almost 50 years ago. And you can never recapture that. A few more things I want to talk about in here. Let's move on to the bad. And when I talk about the bad on this one, it's a little bit tricky because it's the sort of thing that Superman in the comics 50 years ago is very different from Superman in the comics 40 years ago. There was a lot of changes in comics and how mature they were from the 70s to the late 80s. There's just a lot of growing of there's a lot of grown-ups that still read comics, and the Alan Moore's and Watchmen and Frank Miller, they kind of step into the picture, and there's just there was a different flavor, a harder edge. I believe it was 1986 when the Man of Steel run came out and kind of restarted Superman with a different tone, and the nature of Lex Luthor dramatically changed from the 70s by the time you get to the 90s, where he'd been kind of this mad scientist, mustache twirling supervillain for decades, and they kind of reinvented him as sort of like an evil Bruce Wayne. He's the rich guy that has all these corporations that behind the scenes is actually evil, and then of course ran for president, stuff like that. But the character's dramatically changed. The version that we know today, the Michael Rosenbaum version of the character, that was this reinvention that kind of happened in the 1980s. So I say all of that. As much as Superman the movie has this sense of reverence and importance, it was also adapting a version of Superman that is very different from what Superman is today. There's a lot of core essentials that are the same, in particular Superman himself. It hasn't dramatically changed. There's a lot of aw shucks that maybe we wouldn't do as much aw shucks today. But Lex Luthor in particular, and him doing real estate schemes, is a very dated version of the character. And it's the sort of thing that I can if someone watches this movie the first time in 2025 and you go, Lex Luthor's scheme is to buy real estate and use missiles to blow up California so he has real estate, that's kind of corny. You're not wrong. I get it. That's fair. And so, when you get into the actual villain scheme, Gene Hackman's a lot of fun in the movie, but it's not the most interesting version of Lex Luthor. It's not the deepest version of Lex Luthor. Michael Rosenbaum, not just because he was on a TV show, but just that version of the character, what they were doing at the core of that version of a guy that's not setting out to be evil, but was, raised by a man that broke his core and foundation, that set him on a path that led him to become a supervillain. I think that's a much more compelling version than, I'm the greatest criminal mastermind of our time, Lex Luthor, and I want to make money through real estate schemes. It's mustache twirling villains kind of silliness. That's not what we would do now. I think a lot of the stuff in the first hour of this movie isn't what we would do now, and maybe we should. Real estate scheme Lex Luthor is not what we would do now, and for good reason. The other one with this, there is a little bit of 70s camp. In particular, the Otis character is maybe that, if that was the comedy of the time, how much of that is a little bit too much of that 60s, 70s camp. Let's have a little bit of that in there so we have a little bit of humor. And so you have this very dopey, dumb character that's, Mr. Luthor, doing that stuff, and he's just a complete idiot for gags. I guess we do our version of that today. They do these corny characters in MCU films to this day. But comedy is timely, and so this is the 70s version of it, so it plays pretty dated when you see Otis, and even his theme music is a little bit cornier. The villain music isn't menacing, it's kind of goofy. It's a little unfortunate. And of course, just on a simple level of the visuals, it's a nearly 50-year-old movie. They were groundbreaking at the time, but this is a lot of it before we were doing really doing green screen. bought any green screen they were doing was very, very primitive compared. So they're trying to do their best at a time when they simply didn't. Like my phone is 1,000 times more powerful than whatever they were working with. Like there's all this stuff I can do with my phone right now real quick, and there's just no way to do any of that back in the day. And so you watch it and you feel a lot of that. There's a lot of limitations in the film that they were making at the time they were making it. It is what it is. And once again, does that hurt my experience? No, because I grew up watching the movie. But if someone watches the film for the first time now and they're like, oh, I don't know, I just can't get past how dated these effects look. I think that's fair. That's a reasonable thing. You're not saying something crazy. It is a movie that's almost 50 years old. And special effects films usually tend to date. When you're using antiquated effects, they date quite a bit. And their effects are the kind of thing that if you grew up with them, you kind of have a nostalgia or you find a fondness in the practicality or the limitations of them. But when you watch something you're not used to, you tend to just see the faults in it. And in particular, when you watch these modern day 4K adaptations of a 50-year-old movie, there's a lot of faults that you can see in this film. That's fair. That's reasonable. I get it. So, but for me, like I'm trying to, kind of give an objective. Oh, and I guess the other one you have to talk about on here, the movie ends with Superman, flying around the Earth and, spinning the Earth backwards and turning back time. Like some people interpret that he spins the Earth backwards and that makes time go backwards. I interpret that as he flies so fast that he's breaking time barriers and stuff like that and goes back in time by going so fast. Any way you look at it, though, the logic of he goes back in time and undoes some stuff, I don't know what even the logic of the time travel is. It's not a particularly great plot point. It's the sort of thing that, once again, is from a bygone era of comic books and comic book movies where there wasn't quite as much sophistication. There wasn't as much nitpicking, cinema sins, all that stuff where you go, hey, wait a minute, what does that mean? It's the sort of thing where you kind of go, okay, Superman flew backwards really quick, turned back time and saved Lois. We're not stopping to overthink the fact, why doesn't he just do that for every bad thing that happens? We're not overthinking it. We're just doing it. It's fair to criticize that. It's a goofy thing. It's from a less sophisticated time. It is what it is. As for me, I view this as probably the greatest superhero movie of all time because it's the one that invented the genre and it did so many things so well. The fact that there's things that aren't as sophisticated, that have aged, that are very 70s. Yeah, it's 50 years old and it's from the 70s, so of course some things are going to be the case. That doesn't change the incredible things that it did accomplish. It's the one that I grew up with. It's the one that when I was a child and had my Superman shirt, this is what I was thinking of. So it means the world to me. And it's also the one that Kevin Feige has said, whenever they make a new Marvel movie, we go back and we rewatch Superman the movie for good reason. It is the movie that laid the foundation. And I feel like they actually need to go back and rewatch it more and get back to let's really treat this with reverence. Not just try and make popcorn blockbusters that entertain, but the reverent part of it. Let's take this very seriously and tap into something deeper and something special and treat this like the American mythology and not just superficial popcorn entertainment. It's that other level. It's the reverence that made this movie special and has made it a movie that has stood the test of time despite no shortage of elements that pretty clearly are very dated. So for me, this is an amazing film. Overall, it's an A+ on the entertainment scale. We are going 10 out of 10. And we're calling this a must-see movie. This is one of the Mount Rushmore of comic book films. It has to be. It's the original. It laid the foundation as this incredible John Williams score. Like everything copies this movie. Everyone is building off the foundation that this one laid. Of course, it's one of the Mount Rushmore of comic book movies. Let me know your thoughts down below. Did you grow up with it? Are you new to it? Do you have a hot take on it? Are you someone that watched it later on and you're like, hey, I get what you're saying about how important it is, but also I don't get it because it's just too dated for me. Let me know down below. I understand where you're coming from on all of that stuff. Pretty sure I'm going to have more Superman movie reviews coming over the next few weeks, and certainly a ton of Superman content coming when the new movie comes out. Thank you so much for watching. You keep talking movies and TV too much.